With one voice we will sing. Every tribe and every tongue brings us harmony. With one voice we will bring heaven's beautiful melodies down to this earth as we sing to our King with one voice.
Today's sermon is entitled, How Big is Your God? The story goes of a little girl who was in her Sunday school class, and she had a piece of blank paper and she began drawing, and the teacher said to her, "What are you drawing?" She said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher laughed, and the teacher said, "Honey, nobody knows what God looks like." And the little girl said, "Well, they will after I finish this picture." The truth is that nobody knows what God looks like, in spite of this little girl's desire to try to frame a picture of God. God cannot be put into a box. How big is your God? There's a little book that I've had on my shelf for many years. It's by J.B. Phillips, and it's called Your God is Too Small. Your God is too small. It's not a very hard read. Probably would only take you about 3 or 4 hours to read the whole book. But I want to share with you just a few of the things that he has in this little book, because many in this room today, I believe, can relate to the images created through words in this little book. And he has chapters that describe the little gods that are in our life. For example, many of us think about our conscience as God speaking to us. And he refers to that in the book as resident policeman. I want you to think about that for a minute, because some of you, and I've been accused of this and I deny it, but some of you know what it's like to be tooling down the interstate and you see a policeman off to the side. And the thought that comes into your head at that point is, no problem, right? Because you're doing the speed limit. Or not. Resident policeman is this image that God is waiting, kind of hidden in the bushes, waiting to catch you when you do something wrong. Is that your image of God? If so, your God is too small. The second one he has in here is called parental hangover. God is there to make sure you don't mess up when your parents can't be there. You know, like when you go off to college, or when you go to a friend's house to spend the night, or when you get older and you don't let your parents know everything that's going on. But you think that God is the one that's there keeping an eye on you to make sure you don't mess up when your parents are out, when you're out of your parents' sight. If that is your God, then your God is too small. Many of you have this picture, and I heard it this morning. The picture of a grand old man, a guy in a white robe with a great big long white flowing beard and great big long hair. I heard it this morning in our Bible study. God is a very old man living in heaven, is a quote. This, I believe, is influenced in large part by the entertainment industry that has given you pictures of God as some grand old man. And he's a grandfather type, and if you go to him, he'll give you, some gum or candy or something. You can sit in his lap and no problem. But if that's your picture of God, then your God is too small. Another one is meek and mild. This is a soft, sentimental God. A God that never gets angry, that never loses his temper, that never, ever does anything mean, even if it's justified by our sin. If that is your God is too small. Absolute perfection is the next one. Absolute perfection is a picture that God is so perfect because he can do no wrong, and that is true, that there is no way that I can never be perfect. And so I don't even need to try. God is the impossible standard that I can never reach. If that is your God is too small. The next one is heavenly bosom. Detractors of this one often say religious faith is a form of psychological escapism. When life gets too tough, we can always go and climb up into God's lap and lay our head on his shoulder instead of dealing with our problems. Belief in this God prevents us from dealing, they say, with our real-life issues. If that is your God is too small. The last one that I want to share out of this book, there are others, but I want to share one more. It's God in a box. This is the one who is outside of the church and is looking at Christianity and the various different denominations and how they cannot seem to get along with each other. And therefore they see that if they want to get to know God, that they must choose one of these groups and then jump through the hoops that are necessary in order to find God. And it's just too much trouble. If that is your God is too small. The truth is, picturing a small God is what most of us do. And it's perfectly understandable because, you see, we need a God that we can kind of get our arms around. We need a God that we can kind of fashion and shape into a form that we can relate to, that we can understand, that we can cooperate with. We need a God who is more accessible, more manageable, more available. We can get our arms around that kind of God, that kind of small God. In the Old Testament, in the book of Job, Job has a very interesting conversation with God. And as part of that dialogue, God tries to help Job picture him for who he really is. In this passage, and I'm going to encourage you to read it, it's Job 38, verses 1 through 4. It's the entire chapter of Job 38. But instead of giving you that whole thing, I want you to dim the lights, if you would, and play the video, the next slide.
Brace yourself. I will question you. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Have you comprehended the vast expanses? Surely you know. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? The gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of deep shadows? Tell me if you know all this. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set God's dominion over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorms? Who endowed the heart with wisdom, or gave understanding to the mind? Tell me if you know all this.
that put it in perspective at all? Is your God that big? I want to share with you 4 significant points to make you think about how big is your God. I want you to try to answer that question. If your God is too small, then you are too big. If your God is too small, then you are too big. When I was a little boy, my mother used to say to me when I'd get a little cocky, she'd say, "You're getting a little bit too big for your britches there, son." The point is that we often approach God that same way. We often approach God and treat God as if He is someone that we can manage. That God is someone that we can orchestrate. That God is someone that we can handle. You can't handle God. There's no way. You saw the example of that. Samuel 8 tells the story of a dilemma that Samuel had because the people of Israel were complaining because they looked around at all of the other nations that were around them, and they all had earthly kings. And they had no king, and they said to Samuel, they said, "We want a king of our own." And so Samuel goes to God and he says, "God, I don't know what to do because these people are really pressing me. They're really giving me fits about this." And Samuel gets this word from God in 1 Samuel 8, verse 7 and verse 18. The Lord said to Samuel, "Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them." And verse 18. "And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourself, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." You see, what happened was Israel got a little bit too big for his britches. Israel said, "We want to be like everybody else," and God says, "Fine. You want to be like everybody else? Then this is what's going to happen. The king's I'm going to give you a king. I'm going to give you what you asked for." The lesson here is be careful what you ask for. I'm going to give you what you asked for, okay? But what's going to happen is the king's going to require taxes. The king's going to require you to support him. The king's going to require you to bow down to him. The king is going to require you to do things that you don't want to do. Be careful what you ask for. Then when the king starts treating you badly, you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourself, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. If your God is too small, then you are too big. You're too big for your britches. See, this is the problem. We want God to work for us. We want him to be subordinate to us. We want to be in control. We want to be in charge. And we want God to give us what we want. But we don't expect to have to give back to God anything. Where have we heard that before? In our nation, we're becoming a nation where we're takers instead of givers. We're becoming a nation where we expect the government to give us something, but we don't want to give anything to the government. We're finding all kinds of loopholes and ways that we can avoid giving anything to the government, but we expect the government to do something for us, and then we take that image of our government and we kind of project that onto God, and we say, "God, why don't you get in line because the government's doing that for us? Why can't you do that for us?" Oh, we like it when God gives us good stuff. We like it when God does nice things for us. We like it when he blesses us. But when he demands from us, we say, "Not so much, God. You know, I'm a little busy today. I got a lot of things on my plate. But keep blessing me, God. I love your blessings, but don't expect me to do anything." If your God is too small, then you are too big. You're too big for your britches. Second point, if your God is too small, then your problems are too great. Let me say that again. If your God is too small, then your problems are too great. Here's an interesting take on the God is too small dialogue. The God who is responsible for the vastness of the universe, we just saw that in the video, cannot possibly be interested in the lives of the minute specks that reside on one obscure planet out of literally billions and billions and billions of planets. God is so big that he must be too busy for me. So either your God is too small to handle your problems, or he's so great and he's so vast that he can't possibly have time for you. Either way, you lose. Either way, you are the loser in either one of those scenarios. If your God is too small, then your problems are too great. When God is big, then your problems are small. But when God is small, then your problems are big. Because you see, we feel like God can't handle the problems. This is where most of us get in trouble. We feel like our problem is too big for God, and therefore we try to deal with it ourselves. God, I know that you got a lot on your plate, and you got a lot of things going on. But the truth is, God is, I got this big problem over here, but I really don't have any confidence that you can handle it. And so I'm just going to deal with it myself. I'm going to try to handle it. I'm going to try to figure it out all by myself. That's the scenario. Or, God, you're so big, you're so vast, you're so great, and I worship you and I give you thanks for that. You can't possibly care about me. Both of these problems, both of these pictures rather, are big problems for us. Because whichever one we think is true, then we lose. And we really do have to deal with our problems ourselves. But the truth is that God said that I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. That before the foundations of the earth, I knew who you were. When you were still being formed in your mother's womb, I knew you. Everything that you will experience in your life has been laid out for you before, you ready for this? Before the foundations of the earth. God is big enough to form billions and billions of planets, and he's big enough to care about you personally. I can't get my arms around that, but that's okay because that's how big God is. Point number 3. Before we go back to that, there's a passage. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart. This is the crux of it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. Underline that in your Bible if you're not afraid to write in your Bible. Do not lean on your own understanding. In other words, give it to God and don't take it back. Next one, in all your ways. Underline the word all. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will take out the curves in your life. He'll make your path straight. It'll be a straight shot, folks. This is the issue, is that we really show God how much we trust him by how much we let go of in our life when it comes to our problems. When we're willing to say to God, okay, God, I can't deal with this. I don't know how to deal with it. It's beyond my capability. It's beyond my power. It's beyond my resources. I can't handle it. I'm giving it to you. And then let go of it. Excuse me. Let go of it. We want God to be in control, but we don't want to let go. Joe Bradley and I both used to fly helicopters in a previous life. And one of the things that we learned in flight school, when we were learning to fly, there were 2 sets of flight controls in the helicopter. One on the left, one with the left seat and one with the right seat. But the thing about flying a helicopter is that only one person can fly the thing at a time. It is physically impossible, am I right, for two people to fly a helicopter simultaneously, the same helicopter anyway. You cannot. And so in the military, and I don't know if this is true in civilian world, I usually don't have two pilots, so it's not a big deal. But in the military, if we're going to relinquish the controls to the other pilot, we say to that other pilot, you have the controls. Then that pilot looks at you or says these words, very affirmative, I have the controls. Then you say to that pilot again, you have the controls. You have the controls, I have the controls, you have the controls. But there's one more step that you got to do before you can give the controls to that pilot, and that is, let go. If you say you have the controls, God, and God says, I have the controls, and you say you have the controls, God, but you hang on to it, then guess what God's going to have to do? He's going to have to let go. Because you and He together cannot fly that thing. If your God is too small, then your problems are too great. Number 3, if your God is too small, then your sin is too large. I cannot tell you how many people have come to me in the past and have said to me, Pastor, you don't understand. I know that this God thing is good for most people, but you don't know what I've done in my life. You don't know the things that I've done wrong, and there's no way that God could possibly forgive me for all the things that I have done wrong in my life. And if I come into the church, if I had a nickel for every time I heard this, I'd have several $100s. But the truth is people say, if I come into the church, I'm afraid the building's going to cave in on me. Somehow God isn't big enough. The God that I picture in my mind isn't big enough to forgive my sin. C.S. Lewis writes this, indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one. The gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. And that's the way it is. One sin after another sin after another sin. And there's no way that God could ever forgive me for those things. But the truth is we can't overcome sin on our own. Sin is much too strong for us. That is for us by ourselves. But when we give the sin over to God, then with God's help, we can overcome anything that Satan throws at us. Remember the words of the Apostle Paul in Philippians in chapter 4, verse 13. He says, I can do everything, I can do all things through Him who strengthens me. The worst aviation disaster in history was when a United Airlines DC jetliner was 11 miles from where it should have been when it collided with a TWA aircraft Constellation. That tragedy resulted in the death of 135 people. Speaking aeronautically, 11 miles are minuscule. Yet 135 people would be alive today if the jetliner had been where it ought to have been, according to instructions. Listen, disastrous results happen when we fail to follow that straight and narrow way. Remember, He said, if you'll trust in me with all your heart, lean not on your understanding, acknowledge me in all your ways, I will make your path straight. The problem is that we get off of that straight and narrow road. We think we know what we're doing. And so we get off of that road. And God warns us in Proverbs 4, 14 and 15. He says, do not set foot on the path of the wicked or walk in the way of evil men. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn from it and go on your way. We're even told to avoid even coming near sin. If we're not even in the presence of temptation, then it's going to be real hard to sin. But what about those times when you can't get out? What about those times when you do fall? Because we all fall. Listen, God is not going to leave us alone to battle Satan. He will provide a way out. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you will be able to endure it. If we realize that no sin is too big for God, then we can, with his help, overcome any sin in our lives. If your God is too small, though, then your sin may be too large. One more. If your God is too small, then your healing is too much of an impossibility. If your God is too small, then your healing is too much of an impossibility. Listen, I have talked to people before that needed God's intervention in their life. They needed physical healing. They needed emotional healing. They need healing in their marriage relationship. They need healing in their family relationships. They need healing in lots of areas of their life. But they turn to God without believing that God is powerful enough and capable enough to bring that healing about in their lives. You know, when Jesus went about while he was here on the earth healing people, he would say to them, do you believe? And then if they said, yes, I believe, then he said to them, your faith has made you whole. I want you to listen to this because this is very important. If your God is too small, then your healing is too much of an impossibility. We have seen people healed in this place. We have seen people completely cancer-free that have been diagnosed with cancer. But I will tell you that in every case where God has worked miraculously in somebody's life, it is because that person believed that God was powerful enough to do what he said he would do. If you come to God and you say, God, I want you to heal me, but I really don't think that you're capable, then guess what? Your God is too small and he can't heal you. But if you come to God and you say, God, I know that you have the power to heal. I know that you are capable of doing this, and for you this would be no big deal. But God, I want you to bring healing to this person in order that God might receive glory. Yes, one of the outcomes is that the person would be healed, but the bigger outcome, the greater outcome is that God would be glorified in the healing. Okay? You need to understand that. If God heals you, it's for his glory. Because guess what? Even if God heals you, you're going to die. Can I just get real? Okay? I say this a lot, but I like to repeat it because it's true. What is the death rate for humans? Not a trick question. What is the death rate for humans? Give it to me. 100%. Okay, Jonathan, I know about the two guys. But they're not dead yet. They will die. I have this ongoing running discussion with Jonathan in the sound booth up there. There are two guys in the Bible that didn't die. Two guys that didn't die. One of those was Enoch. He walked with God, and then he was not, for he was taken. Okay? And the other one was Elijah, who also was taken by God in a chariot of fire. Okay? But if you read the book of Revelation, there are two witnesses that come back to testify to the Jews, and they kill them. You figure out who those two guys were, okay? They're going to die. They just haven't died yet. The death rate for humans is 100%. Okay, so even if you get healed, you're still going to die. It's going to happen. You just live a little longer. Why do you live a little longer, Joe? For God's glory. You understand this? God can heal you. God can restore your relationship. God can do all of these things. It's not a big deal for him. It's as easy as for you walking over there and switching the light on. God can do it. He spoke the world into existence with his words. If he can do that, he can handle your problems. If he can do that, then he can overcome your sin. If he can do that, he can bring healing to your mortal bodies. But he can't do anything if you don't believe. If your God is too small, then your healing is too much of an impossibility. I don't know if you have ever owned any exotic fish, but the exotic fish koi, K-O-I, originated in Japan. And the Japanese revere, actually the Orientals. I was in China and I saw these everywhere in restaurants and things like that. The Orientals revere these fish. Americans are collecting them in rapid numbers. I tried to grow a couple of them, and it's kind of like my green thumb. I don't have a green thumb, and I don't do animals well, and they didn't live for very long. But the koi come in at least 60 varieties, and no two fish are exactly alike. These are the ones that we sometimes refer to as goldfish when we go to the Chinese restaurant to eat, and we see them in the ponds there. These large catfish-sized fish that are floating there are called koi. Okay? For the amateur collector, you can buy a domestic one for as little as $7.50. But the starting price for a respectable Japanese koi is at least $500, and a grown Japanese koi can be sold for as much as $10,000. The most unusual aspect of these exotic fish is how they grow. Koi can grow up to 3 feet in length. Get a picture of this, 3 feet in length. Or they can remain a few inches long, depending upon the size of the pond. If you put a koi into a very large, spacious pond, that koi can get to as large as 3 feet. But if you stick them in a fishbowl, they're going to remain small. The growth is determined by the size of the pond. If the pond is small, the fish will remain small. If the pond is large, the fish will be large. Regardless of their size, they live up to as long as 75 years, unless you kill them like I did, accidentally. Listen, our faith in God is similar. If we keep God confined to one small aspect of our lives, then our faith, like the koi, will remain small. But if we believe in a bigger God, if we believe in a God and allow him to penetrate our entire lives, then our faith will grow accordingly. So the question that I have for you today is, how big is your God? I can tell you that my God is an awesome God. My God is a great big God. My God is the one that you saw who created all of those stars, who flung them into space, who keeps the earth exactly where it needs to be to keep us from freezing to death or burning up because of the sun. My God is the one that allows me to have my next breath because he ordained it. My God is big enough to do anything. How big is your God? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, I thank you for your word today. I thank you for this word because it reminds us that you are big.
With one voice, we will sing. Every tribe and every tongue brings